My name is Jasmine Bradley, and I am from different sects of Mormonism. Mostly, my dad's family is from Community of Christ. That's Emma's church. My mom's family is from Mexico in Ozumba and San Marcos area, and her mother's side has a lot of Margarito Bautista type strains of thought, and my grandpa, he lived in him and his grandparents lived in the area that Raphael Monroy was in. Um, so yeah, kind of a mixed bag. My parents came to Utah and converted to the LDS. And so yeah, I mostly hang out in fundamentalist spaces. And so I spend the majority of my time with people who stick to the original doctrines of Mormonism. But I see all of it. I also spend a lot of time in LGBTQ Mormon spaces. And I just got married. My husband, Don Bradley, he wrote Lost 116 Pages. Talks about the first half of the Book of Mormon that was lost. So very, very cool to only study the second half and finally learn the first half. So, yep.
Cool. I'm Alejandro Rodriguez. I'm a student here at BYU, and fun fact, my mom and Jasmine's mom both went to Benemérito in Mexico City when they were in high school. So that's kind of a cool
Yeah.
connection. Now we're neighbors, so that's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, but my grandpa on my dad's side and my grandma on my mom's side were the first ones to join the church in my family lineage. And my grandpa went to BYU in the 40s, and my dad went in the 80s, and then I'm at BYU right now. And yeah, so I'm trying to think what other cool things. I mean, I'm at BYU, I study psychology, and philosophy. And then I've been like interacting in like the Mormon space on social media, Twitter, YouTube for a few years now. My big claim to fame is the Latter-day Lobsters, which we run, which has been a wild ride. Um, but it's been fun to um, hear a lot of voices. It's cool to see, like, of course, Jasmine and Dawn's participation there, um, and then of course, like a lot of different perspectives from like different parts of the church, people who have left the church. They're all in there, kind of just like shaking it up, and it's really fun. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of like I'm I go to BYU, so of course I like keep the ch standards of the church, and I attend my ward regularly. But I'm very open-minded to hearing a lot of different perspectives. Um, and then um, and then psychology, like I love thinking about things from a psychological angle, and so I think that's kind of like where um, I kind of have a unique perspective because a lot of people are doing history, and I guess they used to do psychohistory. It's not really popular anymore, like Von Brody and stuff. And I'm not like, I mean, I can go on about that, but I'm trying to update that, trying to update the that stuff. Von Brody was in the early 20th century, and now we're now in the 21st century, so we gotta update things around here.
Perfect, guys. Thank you for their intro. And I think that um, we have three people from different places and different backgrounds. So I think it will be interesting to have this conversation about the movie. So I guess we can start with maybe first thoughts. And maybe you can share what you think of the movie, maybe what you thought when you first heard of it, if you watched the trailer or read an article or things like that. But overall, what's your uh, mini review of the movie? Mine is that I like it, but I'll go into it later.
There was a lot of pushback from a lot of Mormon content creators, and they were kind of on the defense, this isn't how Mormons really are, and they misrepresented Mormons in XYZ way, and that this, that, and the other was inaccurate, you know. And so I walked in thinking it was going to be an anti-Mormon movie. As the plot unfolded, I realized that the movie is actually really pro-Mormon. And you know, the end of the movie actually has to do with religion being a good thing. Um, and so I was really curious why people were so defensive about it. I thought that it's like Alejandro and I were talking like a week ago. We should own our Mormonism. Like we should own the good parts of it, and the things that people misrepresent, I think it's kind of should be not paid attention to, because that movie I thought was really pro-Mormon. It showed a lot about women and women's empowerment and women making really intelligent decisions, talking about religion. Women are usually discouraged in a lot of spaces in talking about religion and critiquing religion. This movie showed that women can talk about religion and have highly complex discussions about it. So I love it. 5 out of 5. It's a little gory, but other than that, it was great.
Yeah, so I was actually not moving. I was traveling to Canada for a conference, for a research conference. And while we were waiting in Toronto, like the trailer dropped, and I remember I was like so hyped. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is!" And I love A24, the studio. I'm not like the biggest horror film fan, but 824, like I think they typically put out like pretty good movies. So, and I heard that the producers of The Quiet Place were the ones behind it. So I was like, "Oh, The Quiet Place was one of my favorite movies." And so I was like really hyped, um and I guess like I get excited just about anything that's culturally Mormon. 'Cause I think it's like I'm faithful LDS, and I hope that Mormonism becomes very mainstream. And like in Utah, of course it is because we're in Utah, but then outside of Utah, like no one really thinks about us that much. Um, but I'm like, oh, like this is kind of cool. Like this is a big studio doing a big movie about the LDS missionaries. This is gonna be like I'm excited. Even and but then I think back like, well, and other productions they haven't done very good with representing us. Like Under the Banner of Heaven was kind of like I thought the script was pretty cringe, right? Um, and then the TikTok one, what was that one? The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And well, I don't know that one. I'm like not into reality TV anyway, so I'm like, oh, this is just like chisme stuff. I was like, whatever. I don't care about it. But A24, I was like, oh, this is gonna be cool. I don't know how they're gonna represent us, and I guess the script had leaked like months before the movie came out. And I didn't even know this. I was too busy with other things. But like Ward Radio and Keynote and a few other people, like they read the script, and their reading of the script was really negative. And I didn't know this until after I saw the movie, and I went back and I watched all the reviews, and I was like, oh, they knew like before watching the movie like all the things like they had all the spoilers. And I have to agree with Jasmine. I was like, oh yeah, like when I walked out of the movie I was like, this is actually like a good, like almost faith promoting movie.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that the other YouTubers didn't catch that when they read the script. I was like kind of disappointed by the LDS response to it, but I understand that like LDS people, especially in Utah, I think, are very motivated to defend kind of like the church's image, and like, and even online, like every week there's someone saying, "Well, we're not Christians," and then everyone gets all riled up, and so people are very sensitive to being misrepresented and misinformation being told about the church, and so I think people are just kind of like anxious about that. And but then after I saw the movie, I was like, oh, this is like kind of faith promoting, and
Yeah.
it was like really fun movie, and I really enjoyed. I mean, yeah, I really enjoyed like a lot of the aspects of the movie. But overall, after I watched it, I was like, oh, this is not. I don't think this is actually painting the church in a bad light. I think it's actually doing the opposite, making us look good. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to me, I'm in Mexico right now, and I'm a movie geek. I love movies, and even though I'm doing this channel, I would love to do a movie channel. I can talk about movies for hours. My wife can attest to it. So when the trailer came out, I just thought A24 and Hugh Grant. And I love the combination. I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. When I click on the trailer is when I realized it was about Latter-day Saint missionaries. But the way at least the teaser played out, um, it was as if they would be put in a maze, and the whole movie was just sort of getting out of the maze. And I thought, well, like my prediction is that maybe if they talk about like faith issues, I'm pretty sure the first like 20 minutes will say any LDS specific stuff, and I bet the rest of the movie will be either survive or God in general. And I sort of got it right, but we'll get to that later. Um, but yeah, I thought since it was a small, I thought it was sort of an indie film and it wouldn't reach Mexico. So I was like, all right, well, I guess one day I'll just read the reviews and maybe eventually get the chance to see it. But well, we got it here too, so I was excited to watch the movie. I did hear about the leaked script. I didn't watch the videos because I didn't want to get spoiled, but I knew that the overall sentiment was that it was
Wait,
um,
how many people were in the theater when you went in Mexico?
um, about, well, honestly, like 30 people,
It's pretty
more
good.
than usual. It's usually pretty empty um, in the mornings, but yeah, and I was excited to watch the movie. I didn't know about the church's Desert News statement or anything like that. I think it's a really good movie, regardless of the religious content.
I've been in a lot of spaces like ex-Mormon spaces, anti-Mormon spaces, atheist spaces, interfaith spaces, different type of Christian spaces. I spend a lot of time in fundamentalist spaces. So when people have actually done a lot of exploration of religion and faith, they know that in the arguments in Heretic are very vanilla. They're not very well thought out, and they're kind of like almost like if you Google like reasons to not be religious, those are the top five that will come up. Um, there are really interesting religious thinkers who have really kind of like a Rubik's Cube. They've actually like worked with these ideas over and over and over in very complex ways. And so were they complex arguments? No. If you've never heard of these arguments, they might seem complex. But somebody I would definitely recommend is David Bentley Hart. He is a great religious thinker. He works with classical theism, and so if you're familiar like with Richard Dawkins or with any of those like anti-religious or anti-God thinkers, David Bentley Hart does classical theism, and so people who have actually gone through a lot of transitions in their faith, they actually understand that simulation theory and control of women in religion and all of these other aspects that were being critiqued are actually kind of 101. They're not very, you know, people this is kind of primary level religious. Well, so I study religion and gender in school. This really is primary. This isn't really like junior high, high school, college, this isn't very complex thought work. But for people who have never been exposed to it, it can seem really scary. And so when I saw that everybody was getting very defensive, I started realizing that a lot of people don't think about religion all day, every day, like I do, or like Alejandro does. Like we think about religion all the time. Like I think about it the second I wake up, the second I go to bed. And so I realized not everyone is like that. And so these ideas might seem really scary. I promise they're not. I would definitely recommend people finding their like a grounding and then actually looking at these ideas and then you get over the shock and then you don't have to run away from them the rest of your life.
Yeah, so I yeah, I mean I agree with everything that Jasmine said and when I first watched the movie I was like there's certain ways that people try to criticize the church, right? Like one way is logically, so you could use arguments and things like that. And another way are ways through like association. So for example, people will say Mormons do weird things, and isn't that weird? And people will feel uncomfortable. Um, or they might even make a argument like, oh, like religion is bad for you because like polygamy, for example, a lot of people will say, oh, well, church leaders did bad things and treated women badly in polygamy, or they were racist, therefore Mormonism is false and bad. And so I was expecting like all of that to happen. I was like bracing myself. I was like, all right, let's go, and but then the writers when they wrote the script like I felt like they actually thought about it and they picked specific arguments about church history that I was like, oh, I was not expecting them to take this route. Like they talked about polygamy but not how weird it is. They talked about polygamy and its implications for Revelation, and I was like, oh, this is a little bit deeper than I'm used to, with anti-Mormon stuff. But then I think really what the movie does is it uses Mormonism to sort of open the door. But then really it's talking about religion in general, and the argument that they use was arguments that you would find like the new atheists using,
Yeah.
things like the sociological argument where, something like the sociological argument is something like you know, it's likely, it doesn't prove this, but it's highly likely that you're religious because you were born in a religious community and your parents were religious and their parents were religious. And so the only reason why you believe in religion is because of your community. And so that's like a sociological argument. And then it went like one level deeper with I can't remember what the religious argument is called, um the types, like the types of Christ, like, oh, in different religions you have figures that are kind of like Christ. And so Christianity is just a derivative of older religious traditions, and the Catholics have been dealing with that forever. Like they've thought about that for thousands of years. Like ancient um Catholic authors would address that, and they're like, oh yeah, we know Horus and Osiris is like Jesus and Mary, but we're cool with it because Jesus is the real deal. And so anyways, I thought it was interesting. Um, but yeah, it wasn't as like I feel like, I know how bad like those arguments, if you want to make a really good argument against the church, you can make a really good one. And I was expecting it to go there, but it didn't go there. So I was like, oh, they're like taking it easy on us. I'm like, well, that's weird. But what I thought was even more shocking is that they criticized Radiohead because they claim that the song Creep was like ripped off, and I was like, oh, all the Radiohead fans are gonna be really upset. I know like rock and roll is really big in Mexico City too. Um, and so I was like, oh, like maybe that will land with like the rock fans in Mexico City. But anyways, everyone here in Utah was more concerned about the Mormonism rather than the rock and roll.
But I wanted to ask you guys about that. What do you think about Mr. Reed's main argument that religion is about control? We can start with you,
Um,
Alejandro.
yeah, sure. Yeah, the religion about control. That's an old argument. I mean, it's like hundreds of years old at least. Karl Marx said that religion was the opiate of the masses, and then people like Nietzsche would say not just religion, but he did say specifically religion, um, but other things too. It's like for him, it's larger than religion, but you know, a lot of like changes in history, shifts in history are about control. And so yeah, I mean that it's an idea that's been around for a long time, right now it's the idea is really popular. One I From the research that I've done at BYU, one of the biggest reasons that people leave religion is because they feel that religion is harmful or oppressive. So that would include things like, it's sexist, discriminatory, maybe they're out to get your money, or it causes anxiety. Um, and so I think for a lot of people that message resonates. So like I always think about Lehi's dream, right? And the big and great and spacious building. And people, depending on who you ask, will say, well, the building represents the great and abominable church. Maybe it represents the Catholic Church, right? If you take the Bruce Farmer Comke interpretation of it. But one way to think about the great and spacious building is that it represents institutions in general, like any type of institution. And because institutions are large, and think about this, it's like if you go into a building, what rules do you follow? Well, you follow the rules of the building, right? Like if you go into someone's house and everyone takes off their shoes, you take off your shoes. Or if everyone is behaving in a certain way, or if everyone accepts food, you accept the food too, and so you follow the rules of the building, so then you go to university, and everyone acts a certain way, they follow certain rules, and you follow the rules, and you don't think about it, you just do it, or when you go to church, or here's a really good example, like if you're LDS, and you go to Catholic Mass, you're gonna try and blend in, and when everyone kneels, you're gonna kneel. I agree that that religion like has its set of rules and its norms, but then I think yeah, everything has its set of norms, and everything has it exerts power and influence on you. And the movie kind of addresses that a little bit, but like it was pointed at religion. But my perspective is yeah, like it's more kind of like Nietzsche, where it's like, oh, there's a lot of things that are like trying to control you. It's not just religion. There's like a lot of things, politics, social media, market forces, um, trends. Like there's a lot of institutions, the university, a lot of things are trying to exert control. And I think you have to be aware and skeptical. And I think that's good. And that also includes, I think, religion. I think people who I feel like I feel for the people who feel like they never had a sense of agency in the church. Um, and I
Yeah.
think people who come back to the church after they've left, I feel like they have a greater sense of agency because they're choosing to be in the church. And I think that's, you know, I think it's important that yes, if you're going to be Christian or Mormon or whatever, whatever building you walk into, there's rules. And then your decision really is like, do you want to be a part of this, and if so, then then go ahead and be happy choosing what you want to do. Um, so I think there is a danger that institutions can control people, including religion. And Mr. Reed really does kind of like he takes it from a religious perspective and say, yeah, religion is about control. But the movie also challenges that, because the sisters resist the entire time. And so it's I think Jasmine probably can say more to that, but the movie is like it's not just about control. There's a dynamic where there's control and people are resisting and something happens. It's not all just one way.
I love all of that. I couldn't love that more. In Utah we have a lot of yeah, I absolutely love what Alejandro said, and I loved how he addressed this idea behind when people have a kickback on not feeling like they're in control of their lives. That's usually a reaction. And for that, I do show a lot of compassion and empathy. That's hard. And especially, marginalized identities. People who feel like they don't have a lot of power over their lives, or people who feel like they're going to be punished if they live their true selves, LGBTQ people, things like that. I have all the compassion in the world for people who feel the need to have control over their lives again. I couldn't express the depth of compassion that I have for people who are in that mindset, and I understand it myself. And I actually think it's natural and it's a part of spiritual development and spiritual maturing. Yeah, so when I look at the Mormon movement, I think to myself a lot when am involved in marginalized spaces. Am I being reactionary or do I want influence? And I spend a lot of time in the ex-Mormon and anti-Mormon communities. And the thing about the ex-Mormon and anti-Mormon communities is a lot of them are very lonely. And when they do connect to other ex-Mormons or anti-Mormons, they usually do it over their hatred of something, like the church or religion or something. So that's not actually really high quality human connection. And that's a process that they're going through. I'm not saying that that's a negative space to be in. I actually think it's very positive for people to think those things through. Um, but that ex-Mormon and anti-Mormon and anti-religious space, if you look at the statistics for religion, religion is the greatest, it has the greatest ability to unite humans, regardless of religious view. It's churches are the greatest spaces, and especially in the United States. The United States is quite a bit different from Mexico. We don't have a lot of social events outside of church. And and so church is where we get our socialization. We're kind of a lonely country. And so when people decide to not be involved in church, they really end up in spaces that are very lonely. And that's a reaction to the control. And of course thinking things through about their views of not thinking it's true and all of that honesty, internal honesty is another reason. So all of those things can be true. However, the price of being anti-religious can potentially be a lot of loneliness or not the access to a community that one might otherwise have. Um, Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, he said, "We have absolutely no control over what happens to us in life, but we have paramount control over how we respond to those events." And so that's something that I've really realized being a Mormon woman in this conversation is that I have no control over the history. I have no control over what happened. I have no control over what President Nelson says. However, I do have control over, the empowerment and what I say to Jessica, to Alejandro's wife, and lifting her up. I do have power over my own view of myself and seeing myself as a heavenly mother and seeing myself as divine and a heavenly mother, even though other people don't see me that way, right? I have control over my ability to feel self-respect and dignity with my own choices that I make. So, and those things, that's really where you get to spiritual growth, is when you feel that you have influence and control over yourself and over your community. And I personally have found that being in a Mormon space and a Mormon community is where I have more influence. If I was ex-Mormon or anti-Mormon, I wouldn't have as much influence as I do being in these spaces where I can actually talk about how can we improve, how can we progress as a community, how can we think differently, how can we think better, how can we feel deeper, how can we develop women's issues more. This is especially the rubber kind of meets the road when it comes to, especially in Mormonism, polygamy, right? How are women to be treated, right? Do we treat women like Joseph Smith treated Emma? Do we treat women how Joseph Smith treated the other 37 wives? Do we treat women how Brigham Young treated the women? The 50 whatever women he was marrying to? How do we treat women? What is Heavenly Mother? Like, what is the feminine divine? How have we treated the feminine divine as sacred, or have we not been, and so in being a participant in those spaces is really fulfilling, right? It's so fulfilling. And so a woman could be mad. They could be really mad about um the treatment of women, or they could be involved in the beautiful future that is to come. And it's coming. The people, the brethren at the very top, they see more than we think they see. They really do. And because this is a global church, we actually have to move slower than we would move in the first world countries. when it comes to women's issues, when it comes to LGBTQ issues, finances, a lot of other issues that people have faith crises in the first world country over. We're not really looking at the second and third world countries. They do understand these issues. They really do. And so being involved in the conversation and having access to community to me is more fulfilling than I understand these arguments very well. In fundamentalist spaces, some of my best friends are polygamist women, in fundamentalist spaces, they believe in the patriarchal order where there's God, and then there's man, and then there's women, and then there's children, and then there's animals, right? And so that patriarchal order is paramount. Patriarchy is paramount, priesthood is paramount, right? So the fundamentalist spaces I spend a lot of my time in, they're very invested in the old Mormonism that was hyper controlling of women. So I'm very understanding about these arguments regarding religion and control. Um, when we look at religion, though, there's always a double side. So I just finished listening to a podcast called Sanctuary, and these people, they're so cool. They look at the Bible, and these white Americans look at the Bible, and they break the law to protect immigrants that come to the United States because they believe that's what Christ would do. So, religion can be a sword that can be used for evil and good. And you see both of it. You see both, You see polygamous women who are very self-actualized. You see white Americans who are very Christian because of their religion. So religion can be both. It's to say it's only one, I think is more of a reaction than an intentional wanting to influence the community. So it's the difference between a child and a parent. A child reacts. A parent thinks about longevity and thinks about the long-term lineage and health of the community. So I care about what happens to my Mormon family after I die. And being ex-Mormon and anti-Mormon does not actually help my Mormon family become healthier and stronger. And though I agree with a lot of the arguments, historicity of the Book of Mormon, control of women, on and on and on, that still staying in community actually helps me make those conversations more complex so we can be healthier. And so there are other things to think about other than control and black and white thinking, such as complexity and health and what type of legacy do we want to leave. Those things are really highly valuable. So when it comes to questions about control and women and religion, I've already been through that process, and I kind of, would rather submit to the control to have influence. But I already went through my process of not submitting. So is it a stage? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I can't say. But that's how it's been for me, is that I will live and die for my Mormon community, aside from the control that somebody might think that it imposes, because I care about my community. I care about my spiritual family. That's my heart. And so, control what I wear, but I have my beating heart that, loves my community. So when it comes to our theological development, we're kind of early. You guys are to be gods. So what am I? If you guys say it, you might get excommunicated, right? So do you see what I'm saying? Women kind of have to see what they want to see, and a lot of people don't like that. I actually think it's a space of creation. I actually think that's a good thing, because if men don't give us what we need to be, then we can self-actualize, right? And so I love that. That's a very deep insight. And it's an insight that is complex, and women who are very complex spiritual thinkers and creators, they get there. And that's how they participate effectively. So I just love that insight.
Yeah, I actually love what you just said. Because it squares with what I've been learning too about psychology. It's like if there are things that are unknown, um, like like if you're walking down the street and you see like a shadow, you're gonna immediately assume it's the worst thing. Like, oh my gosh, there's someone's gonna rob me, you know?
It's a ghost.
Um, yeah, or something, right? And but it's like that too, because they're the our theology is early, and there's a lot of things we don't know, and those things that we don't know, it's very much human nature to be anxious and then to project into that unknown, like the worst things you can think of, you know, and but that's not a choice. It's just your reaction, and so you can take a step back and say, wait, let me think, let me choose and to deliberately see what I can find here, you know, and then you start getting into real insightful things. I want to mention one more thing about like agency. I think that's important. So um a few things. So like in therapy, for example, usually if you the people who go to therapy are the people who feel like they're so stuck that they need help. That's why they hire a therapist. They pay them to help them because they can't do it on their own. And so their hands are like tied. They have very little self-efficacy.
Yeah.
And then if you have a really good therapist, a good so a bad therapist would say, haha, I fixed you. Here you go. But a good therapist would say, no. You fixed you and you did all that outside of therapy because you're only in here an hour a week. You did the work and you were able to do the things you needed to do to take on your problems on your own. And
Mhm.
so by the time you're done with therapy, you should be able to like have the agency to like, oh, confront your problems, you know? And your therapist is always there, but you now feel the confidence to do it on your own. With religion, I think one of the things that bugs me is people will say, well, church is like a hospital. And it's like, no, church is like therapy. Like you go to therapy, but all the work that you do to become a good person all happens outside of church. It all happens during the week, and not just on Sunday. And then by the time you're done,
Yeah.
you've changed, and now you feel like you have the faith and the confidence, and you trust God that now you can confront whatever happens in life, you know. And in the Heretic movie, it's so crazy because you see that kind of happen in like a really gruesome way. Sister Paxton is like kind of green. She's like, "Oh, I don't have a baptism yet. I don't know what to do," and she's kind of awkward. But then by the end of the movie, she's like sharp, and she's like she kills. Well, she doesn't kill him, but she escapes from Mr. Reed. Sister Barnes kills him, you know, and she's able to escape. And so the transformation is, I think, is fantastic. Like it was spot on. And I think people, the church, I even think is even like when they changed the manual for the youth, they got rid of a lot of rules and they said you decide what you're gonna do. And so that's giving
Yeah.
people a chance to be intrinsically motivated to be internally motivated to say I'm going to choose the standards that I want to keep and I'm going
Yeah.
to do it. And that's good for people's development, especially for youth. It's really great for youth for them to learn to make decisions on their own and choose the what faith looks like to them.
Yes. Baby.
If you have to save yourself, if you pray to accept God's will, or if you pray because you care for each other, then what does God have to do? And people sort of say it in a way that, God really is not that active in life as we think, or um, there's no reason to think that God exists if we're supposed to do everything ourselves. I don't know if I uh, phrased that correctly, but I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on maybe that, on if we do everything, or if we heal ourselves through therapy, if we pray for each other to create the sense of community, then is God really necessary? Like, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
When it comes to when it comes to like, oh, if we have to do things ourselves, why would we rely on God? Why would we rely on a religion? I think at least for me, the key between us and God is this idea of Zion. So, the city of holiness, the city of refuge where the Lord protects his people, right? And in Zion, there are supposed to be no poor, there are supposed to be no hungry, no weary. We're supposed to take care of each other. So it's my personal view that we can't really access God unless we're on a certain, well, we can always access God, but we can't really communally access God until we actually work for our brothers and sisters so that I can't access God without my siblings, you know? And I go to, maybe, Alejandro's familiar with this, but internal family systems is a therapy, and it's the idea that there's the core self and then there's different parts. So there might be protectors and then exiles. And what happens is these parts go in front of the self. So if the self is Jesus and you have an exile coming in front of the self, you don't really get Christianity, you get kind of like woundedness. Or if you have a protector coming, you don't get Christianity, you get like your bully, kind of like a bully part. And so the idea with behind this type of thought is that in somebody's internal mind and also in external systems, we need to harmonize the system in order to lift. Um, and so when we can harmonize the protectors and the exiles, the true Christ can come in front like the sun, kind of like clouds leaving, and then the sun can shine. And so I think that we have become, and from a historical point of view, we're in late stage capitalism. We are in a state where we really value self-reliance. This is not what the early saints valued. The early saints valued a lot of communal effort. They valued a lot of, this is where you get kind of a united order ideas, the law of consecration, the bishop's warehouse, where all of the saints work together, kind of like the city of Enoch, where we uplift each other and then God lifts us up together. And so, because we're such individual thinkers, and a lot of it does have to do with it's 2024, because we're such individual thinkers, we really want and demand God to do things for us instead of actually seeing like, you know, I was at Alejandro's house the other day taking care of his beautiful, perfect little baby, him and Jessica. And I was playing with his baby Sophie, and I literally like had an angel experience where I was like, this girl is so close to the veil. And that to me is Zion. That to me is like I experience God through others. And so I think people are very transactional, and I think we've been trained to be transactional because it's 2024. You go to the grocery store and you have 200 choices for cereal. And so we're trained to be very transactional. If I give this, I get that. But the reality is that community is very complex and has to do with deep feeling and what it is to be human. And I think when people can confront what it is to be human, they see the face of God. Um, so I actually think it's through and that's why I think Heretic was such a pro-Mormon and pro-religious movie. The bad guy dies and the sister missionaries are alive because of these higher understandings of religion. Not that it's like a transaction, that it's a process of becoming human, therefore becoming God. This is actually called theosis. Um, Mormon transhumanism does a great job at unpacking theosis, this idea of, and Joseph Smith, oh my gosh, you want to talk about a man who wanted to become a god and encouraged everyone around him to become a god? That's Joseph, man. He was like, how do we refine and refine and refine until we're gods ourselves? And so there's other ways of thinking about it other than the transactional thinking that are very spiritual. So.
Yeah,
And the
that's
magic
awesome.
underwear could be a very important way, right? You put it on every single day, and it's like your covenant to become more and more godly. So sure, it's magic.
No, totally. Well, I love everything you just said. And thank you for sharing that about Sophie. And again, thank you for watching her. I love Sophie so much.
I know.
Um,
Sophie's wonderful. I
yeah.
Sophie's just wonderful. So
Um, yeah, so a lot of the stuff you said about the transactional aspect of culture, it's so interesting. I feel like because we're in the church in the United States. The United States has a really strong culture. Protestantism in the United States is really like it's crazy here. Like it's really cringe. Like the Protestant scene, it makes me very uncomfortable. But in America, we're like extremely individualistic. Like um we're like super into like don't depend on anyone. You don't even talk to your neighbor. You have to rely on yourself, be self-sufficient. Protestants literally today will go to a church, and if they don't like it, they'll go to the one down the street, and then if they don't like that one, they'll go to the one in the next city, right? And you pick and choose, and it's you find the one that like it's like shopping. You're literally shopping for a church. Um, Joseph Smith, though, he does something so interesting. He doesn't say salvation is individual. Like in the New Testament, it says that salvation is kind of an individual matter, and that's kind of like a Protestant thing. Joseph Smith says, no, 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 no. We're either all going together or we're not going at all, right? And so he creates the temples and the baptisms for the dead. And one of my favorite quotes from Joseph Smith says, the nearer we get to our Heavenly Father, the more we are disposed to look with compassion on perishing souls. We feel that we want to take upon our shoulders and cast their sins behind our backs. And I think that's such a great quote. It's like the transfer. So here's the answer to your question. Why is God not involved when we pray to Him and when we do our ordinances? Why does it feel like God makes us do all the work? One of the reason is because we're growing, we're trying to learn, and two, the purpose of the ordinances and praying and fasting and going to church and serving in your church calling is to change you. That's what it's meant for it to do. It's not like I pray 50 times and I get a cookie. Um, you should pray so that you feel the Spirit, so that you're moved and that your soul changes. And that's the point. Like it's about change. And so God can't change you unless you want to change. That's the first thing. You can't change anyone unless they want to change. You can't change unless you want to change. And then, you know, like if you ever go to a beautiful art museum or like you go to France and you see the architecture or you see a movie, right? Or you hear a song that totally just like it's like wow, right? Like or if you go camping and you see the stars at night, like those experiences, they change you, you're like in awe. And that's the spiritual connection that you're seeking, It's not about like, oh, I mean everyone has this example, right? Like I lost my wallet, I prayed, and then I looked and I found it under my coat or something, right? Like that's nice, like, and I'm sure God helped you, and that's good, but like really the takeaway is like, no, God is changing you and you're part of that process, and he can't just do it for you. You have to want to change, and you have to go through the hard work of changing. I was just reading a book actually today. It was saying that the word for soul and for the word in Greek for psyche, it's psyche. But the word psyche means soul, it means spirit, and it also means something like a butterfly. So like a butterfly changes, it has a radical transformation. And so I think that's why, um, I think people are missing the point. And especially in America, I think we miss the point. We think it's all about I do this, you do that, I pay this, you pay that. Even our idea of the atonement is like we are indebted to God.
Yes.
And the Book of Mormon actually rejects that type of thinking, like that type of atonement. It doesn't.
Yes.
The, you know, it says something different about the atonement. President Nelson said, if you study the Book of Mormon, the Book of Mormon has the most complete understanding of the atonement, and that's true. But it also means that your old understanding of the atonement, is not 100% correct. And so I think we have to really, and this is not me talking from like a anti-capitalist perspective, although that's good too, right? There's aspects about the market that are not good. Um, so this isn't me like being a communist or something, but or this isn't political. It's like no, literally like if you're in a relationship with someone, if you love them, it's not transactional. It's not like I owe. It's like I don't take you to dinner and you owe me. That's evil, right? That's messed up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but a true loving relationship is one of mutual cooperation, mutual forgiveness and love across the law. Like You're married. Everyone here is married. Like, how many times have you forgiven your spouse? A bazillion times. How many times are you going to forgive them? A bazillion more times, probably later today, right? And so that's like the relationship. It's like giving, it's a giving relationship. You're loving people, and that the love that you experience for other people is supposed to change you. So that's I think that's what we're here to learn. I don't think it's not like you can't take a pill and do it. You can't have there's not enough money in your bank account that will do it. Um, we're here to change and be changed by God's love. So that's why anyway, that answers your question, I hope.
Let's say that people watch this movie and they like it. They don't have anything against Mormonism, but they remember, oh, Joseph Smith slept with Fanny Alger, and like the more these things enter like pop culture, many people will meet missionaries and they will say, "Oh, I watched this movie and they said that Joseph had an affair with Fanny." And like you said, maybe the reaction from missionaries, many of them, I don't think that all of them, but many of them won't know what the that's about. And they will say, "Oh, well, like Sister Paxton said, where are you getting this information from?" Or no, that's not true, or things like that. What could I say? What should I say? And I think that um, the movie uh, could maybe spark that conversation. So I wanted to this last question: how can missionaries, you know, like tackle these topics? Because I think, like I said, we can all just sort of go in denial mode forever, but I don't think that helps. So, what do you think about maybe that aspect?
It's very difficult. I'm trying to think. So in the church, right? Like, there's a few really interesting things about church members, at least in the United States. It's hard to know because we're a worldwide church. It's hard to say about the whole world, but at least in the United States, Pew Research did a study about education levels and church activity. And so among Jews and Protestants, the more educated you were, the less active you were. For Catholics, it was like there was no relationship, which was interesting. And then for Mormons, the more educated you were, the more active you were, which is really interesting. And I think, I mean, in the US, right? So that's where BYU is, and the three different BYUs, and we have a lot of college educated people. Oh, okay. So here's the thing. I think people naturally, when there are things they don't know, people are naturally anxious and hesitant about them. In America, in my wards in Utah, there's always that one guy at church who like knows all the church history and he'll say things about church history. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't like what you're saying because you're challenging what I knew about polygamy or women in the priesthood or blacks in the priesthood or all sorts of stuff, right?" And so people are kind of like turned off by that person. And that's unfortunate, but it's also human nature to be like, "Ooh, I don't want to have a hard conversation at church." But I think the important thing, so Elder Maxwell, he said this to college professors at BYU. He said, you have to learn how to be bilingual, where you talk the talk of the academy, right? Like you're an expert in your field. You know how to talk about physics and chemistry and biology
Yeah.
and things like that. But then you also know how to talk about church and faith and scripture and staying on the covenant path. And it's hard to do that, but I think everyone should practice. Like you should learn how to practice. You should practice speaking about uh church history and tough topics in a way that makes people listen to you.
Yes.
Like I feel like if you're going to talk to anyone about anything, you should talk to them in a way in which they're engaged. I feel like that's kind of obvious, but in practice, it's not so obvious because oftentimes, especially in school, when you're talking, you're talking in a way that shows the other person that you've done your homework and that you've done your work, but you're not really talking to them in a way meant for them to actually understand you. And those are different ways of thinking and writing and talking. And so you have to balance like what you know and what you don't know and what people know and what people don't know. And you have to talk in a way that people are like that they're going to understand. And I think that's going to be helpful for people who are more kind of like nerdy like us, who are like into church topics. And it's going to be helpful for the people who don't know those things, because now they can understand those things in a way that they understand. So I think that it's going to take practice. We're a young church. Um, and also these topics are kind of specialized, so the people that know about this stuff is going to be a lot less than the people who don't know about them. And we have to like bridge those gaps, and it's going to take a lot of work. But that's my recommendation, and that's going to be a long-term project.
I love that. Yeah, I couldn't love I couldn't love what Alejandro said more. I love this theme that he was really highlighting about thinking. And like what you were saying, Gustavo, what Jim Bennett says, we can't deny these things anymore. We're not in the 1950s, we can't deny Fanny Alger and what happened there. We can't deny polyandry. Smith was married 10 women who were already married. We can't deny Brigham Young and how he treated his wives, some of the abuse and the abandonment, things like that. We can't deny Wilford Woodruff being sealed to 300, some under, some very young. We can't deny Book of Mormon historicity. We can't deny LGBTQ issues. Is that what Christ would do? Book of Abraham, blacks in the priesthood, women's issues, man, the list goes on, right? We can't deny any of those things. They're there, right? So the next question is, how do we deal with them? And this is a really fruitful question. I come from a Latino family, and we like to deny. We like to say, if you look the other way, the mess isn't there. And denial is something I've had to think a lot about. Like, what is the psychology behind people who just want to deny? And denial is the first stage of the grief process. Acceptance is the last, but if I can extend that, creation is the most godly form of spirituality to me, being ultimate creators. And ultimately, like we in our religion, we believe that we ultimately will be gods and goddesses and be creators of our own. And so in order to be that refined god and goddess, we actually need to get into that creation zone. We can't create unless we actually accept that things are in their raw material. If you look at the scientific table of elements, these elements are raw, they're raw material. And when we can accept that they're raw, then we can actually do chemistry and create worlds. So why would we want to deny? We gain a lot from accepting. We gain tons of creative material from accepting. So my husband is the world expert in Fanny Alger, and the basic story behind that is that she was adopted by Joseph Smith and Emma when she was 16, and then there was some sort of marriage sealing right when she was 18, for her to be his wife. These are hard topics. They are. And polygamy and Mormon male polygamy in general is hard, right? If you go through, there are every once in a while, there are women who will stand by it, such as Helen Mar Kimball. But if you go through story by story by story, when it comes to Joseph Smith's polygamy, Brigham Young's polygamy, and so on, a lot of them really are, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of suffering. So if we accept this, if we accept that this is the reality, then who do we turn to for healing? Christ. Christ is who we turn to. So it's my personal testimony that polygamy refines our Christianity. Polygamy allows us to really be flexible on how we can, what forgiveness means, what giving grace means, what being compassionate, what that means, what being understanding towards the human experience and why things happen the way they happened, right? I think that Christianity, because of the atonement, is the ultimate healing feedback loop. So whatever trauma, suffering, pain is accumulated flips back into and can actually be healed by Christianity and flipped into creative material. So at Don and I, we work a lot with apologetics, and I work at he works with apologetics. I work with critiquing apologetics. That's what I like to say. Right, Alex. Alejandro gets a earful quite a bit, but I think that higher quality apologetics really would be how do we apply Christianity to the things that have happened? And does that actually refine us and make us better people? We actually gain when we accept. We gain the ability to have all of that raw material. Um, I think where people get messed up is, oh, if Joseph Smith did this, then he's not a prophet. Um, Prophets to me, they're very, um, I don't know if you have like a grandpa or a great grandpa who made a mistake, infidelity,
Definitely.
yeah, exactly. But isn't he still the patriarch of your family? Do you say he never did
Right,
any good because he made this mistake?
right.
Right. No, he's still the patriarch. And so prophets are just like that. They make mistakes, and by actually learning from their mistakes, that's what makes them prophetic. When we learn, we're the ones who make them prophets by learning from their mistakes and not doing it that way. We are the ones that make them prophets by how we interact with their mistakes. And so that's kind of a more multi-dynamic way of viewing faith. So anyways, Christ is we need faithful people, right? But we need faithful religious thinkers. We need, Joseph Smith was a thinker. Jesus Christ was a thinker. God is a thinker. God is intelligence. And for us to be gods, we need to refine our thinking.
So overall a good movie.
I knew.
I thought it was a good movie. Yeah, I think I give it like a solid like 8.5 out of 10, like almost 9 out of 10.
Man, it
I
was
don't
free
know.
marketing for the church.
Yeah,
The
I
church
think so too.
gave you A24 for all the free marketing.
If you want to watch the film, go watch it. If you don't like it, don't like it. Like it's cool.
Yeah.
But I think there's good things in it. I liked it. We had a good time. Um, yeah, so cool.
Yeah. We don't have to be defensive. We can be offensive, like own how cool Mormonism is, instead of getting
Yeah.
upset, that something wasn't portrayed accurately. Own it. That's cool. It was freaking cool. 10 out of 10. I loved it.